Thank you both. That was beautiful, beautiful heart music. Before we start our last lecture for the evening, we have a few announcements. When you're leaving tonight, we have we have a policeman, but he didn't bring his cruiser. But he's going to be in the middle, median lane here. So this is what the request is, that when you exit, you are going to go right, okay? You're going to have to, if you're going to need to go left, you're going to have to go and turn around. But he has requested that everybody, when you exit the parking lot, turn right. He's going to direct traffic to go right. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Now, tomorrow, we are going to have a little bit of a different, we have two things going on tomorrow, of course. We have our afternoon session, and then we have an opportunity. Barbara has consented to speak at our 11 o'clock worship service. And so what Barbara's going to be speaking about is her journey, and it's going to be her walk with God. She has an amazing story. Her life has been amazing, and all the events that has happened and transpired. So it's something that will be encouraging and to you as you hear her story. Now that's going to be at 11 o'clock here. So at 10 o'clock, we do have, just to let you know, we have some Bible studies going on. One is going to be in the side room where the books are right now. And then we're going to have studies in the sanctuary. If you want to visit any of those classes, you're more than welcome. But if you're coming in for the 11 o'clock, what we're going to ask you, because we're going to be pretty full tomorrow. But all of you that have been here with us for the week, we want you to come in about 10 o'clock so that you can come in and sit, okay? So that you can be here ready. And then because we're going to be, we have an overflow in the sanctuary, but we want all of you to be in here that have been with us throughout the week. So if you have any questions, let me know. Please bring your name badges. If you don't have one, if you lost it, see us before you exit. We'll go ahead and make you another one. But your name badges, when we see that coming through, we know that you have been here with us, and we're going to just let you go. Come on in, okay? So there's going to be food for everyone tomorrow. Everyone is served lunch, okay? And we are serving lunch at 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, at 1:30. We'll have that. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that if you had any questions about what we're doing tomorrow, and we can explain that. So now what we'd like to do is to invite Barbara back up. And this is going to be for her final lecture for this evening. Now let's welcome Barbara.
Testing, testing. Yes, yes, I have voice. But I'm holding a microphone. You've probably heard that the best laid plans of mice and man are known to go astray. You've heard that? Yes, yes. So, we've got a microphone. And the class tonight is one that interests, I think, every single person. It's healing the mind. You see, every heart has its sorrow. Every human being has been through things that have maybe broken their heart, struggling times, challenging times. But there is healing. There is healing for the mind. That is the good news. And there's been a book for sale out in the book table called Depression: A Way Out. It's by Dr. Neil Nedley. You see, my history is that I worked as a psychiatric nurse in my late teens, early 20s, and I didn't see people get better. I noticed that they went in group therapies. I noticed they were in drug therapies, but I did not see people get better because the same people kept coming back again and again, the same people. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done, expect different results. Looks like we've got the microphone working. Want me to hold that up? As we put this back on. So I'll take that away. Test, yep. Test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, and if Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, how many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? That's usually the one that tells us. Okay. Thank you. What did I do before Jacqueline was with me? Thank you very much. So when I worked as a psych nurse, I really didn't see people get better. I was only young, and I just thought to myself, well, this isn't working. But I was quiet and shy, but I just observed. And then I became a mother and had lots of children. And it probably wasn't for another maybe 16 years. See, in that 16 years, I became very interested in natural health. I didn't want to give my children drugs, so I learnt quite a bit about natural health. I had a repertoire of all bits and pieces I do with my children, but the link between mental illness and natural treatments was really in the back of my mind until I attended a lecture by Dr. Neil Nedley, and this would have been maybe 18 years ago now. And I'd heard about this American doctor, and I was interested to hear what his stance was on mental illness and health. It was quite a big seminar. There's a lot of people there. And he started by saying that as a GP, he was a little bit concerned at how many of his patients were on antidepressants. And he decided that he would try some lifestyle changes with them. And the lifestyle changes, I'm sure you're not surprised to see this, were the Sustain Me principles. How does sunshine affect the mind? Well, our eyes are an extension of the brain, and this brain needs sun, and it gets sun through the eyes. And I do never suggest we look at the sun. But did you know that the ultraviolet rays from the sun go through neurochemical pathways, hit the pineal gland, and cause a release in serotonin? Serotonin is your mood hormone. And I think we can all testify we feel good on a sunny day. And that's why, because of what those sun's rays are doing to the brain. Use of water. Our brain is a hydroelectric system. So no hydro, no electricity. In a state of dehydration, the brain can develop negative thought patterns. And I know as a psych nurse, I remember that the patients used to have lots of tea, lots of coffee, lots of Coke, lots of soda. It's not a lot of water. Sleep. In his book, Why We Sleep, Dr. Matthew Walker, he shows that 10 nights of 6 hours sleep a night can double your risk of developing depression. because the brain needs to be recharged and it needs to be rejuvenated and rested in those night hours. But there are many people who are not getting those hours of rest and rejuvenation, and little by little, this takes its toll on the brain. Trusting God, this takes into consideration our stress levels. Do you know, God gave us a choice, and we've got a choice between faith and fear. And we all get challenged. We all get challenged at times, but we do have a choice. Whether we trust that God is a solution God and can take us through this, or whether we choose to take on fear. And remember what God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, he said, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. And what a sound mind does is it considers, it weighs up the pros and the cons. Where does this happen? This happens in the front part of our brain. And the front part of our brain is where our reasoning powers reside. It's where our intellect is. And it is also where judgment takes place. But I consider that the fourth function of this front part of the brain is the most wonderful gift that God gave to man. It's the will. And the will is the governing power in the nature of man. It is the power of decision or of choice. It's the gift that God gave to man. He made us free moral agents. So when God said, I've not given you this spirit of fear, but of power. What's power? Isn't knowledge power? Love holds us together. A sound mind. That's what a sound mind is. A sound mind is a proper functioning prefrontal cortex. So our reason, our intellect, and judgment are doing well. And you can see by looking at this that God designed our brain so that every decision we make be made according to reason, intellect, and judgment. We should never make a decision on fear. What is fear? Fear is an emotion. And here is the emotional part of the brain. It's called the limbic system. And the limbic system is often called the E-brain. E-brain meaning the emotional brain. And God designed our brain so that our emotions thread through the prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex is our board of senses, our board of critiques. And when the emotions rise, they thread through the prefrontal cortex. And at that point, we can say, nah, I'm not going to say that. Or, yes, I think that's a good thing to say. How important is a fully functioning prefrontal cortex? Because our decisions determine our destiny. We don't choose what happens to us, no. But we choose our destiny by the way we respond or react to what happens to us. And I thank God every day that we will always think it before we say it. Isn't that good news? But if the prefrontal cortex is compromised, why would it be compromised? It's compromised when we don't get sun. It's compromised when we're dehydrated. It's compromised when we don't get enough sleep. And with those compromises, it's easy to actually listen to our emotions because the prefrontal cortex isn't working well. Abstain. There are some things that severely compromise prefrontal cortex. And what's that? Not only lack of sleep, not only dehydration, but also caffeine. Caffeine disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain, causing a chemical imbalance in the brain. What's the definition of depression? It's a chemical balance in the brain. Well, what's my next question? Oh, it's still here, my faithful wife. Why is there a chemical imbalance in the brain? Caffeine causes a chemical imbalance in the brain. And when I worked as a psychiatric nurse, the patients are drinking coffee and tea and Coke all the time, lots of caffeine. But guess who else is drinking it? The nurses. So how come they don't have mental illness? You'd be surprised. I was very surprised. I was very surprised at the amount of nurses who I found were themselves on medication. I mentioned this in a lecture a few years ago, and afterwards a psych nurse came up to me very upset. She said, I'm a psych nurse and I'm not on antidepressants. I said, I'm so glad. And I was a psych nurse and I wasn't on antidepressants. Yeah, they're not all on antidepressants, but there certainly is an element that is. What also can cause disruptions in brain function is sugar. There's a book called Sugar Blues by William Dufties. And the reason he called this book Sugar Blues, because that's what sugar causes. There's an initial rise, as we looked at in our last lecture, then there's a corresponding dump. Now, our brain can only hold a 2-minute supply of glucose. And so when blood glucose levels go low, it only takes 2 minutes before prefrontal cortex is not even working. Only takes 2 minutes before reason, intellect and judgment, they're actually not functioning. And how many drinks and foods people eat are a combination of sugar and caffeine. Sugar causing the fuel imbalance, caffeine causing the chemical imbalance. But there's something else, and we looked at it in our last lecture. It's wheat. And I showed you how wheat gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. And then you get the corresponding low. In fact, I've read several books showing the link between wheat and mental illness. One's called Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter. He's a neurologist, and he quotes psychiatrists in his book who were taking their schizophrenia, severely depressed patients off wheat and getting a 50% improvement. But also Dr. Bruce Fife in his 2 books, one's Stop Autism Now, the other one, Stop Alzheimer's Now, has written several books, but these are the 2 books he's written on the mind. And he shows that stopping that hybridized wheat, 50% improvement. And he's got case study after case study there. Also, Natasha Campbell-McBride, she's another doctor who's written a book on this. Her book's called Gut and Psychology, and she shows what happens in the gut with this hybridized complex wheat. We thought we'd totally covered wheat. And now to know that it plays a role, it can play a role, it doesn't always play a role, but it can play a role in certain mental illnesses. So looking at conquering depression, yes, the caffeine, yes, the refined sugars, also the wheat, alcohol. Alcohol's a neurotoxin. What does neurotoxin mean? This is our brain cell, and alcohol as a neurotoxin kills brain cells. And these brain cells, the brain cells we have now, we have for life. We've got to look after them. Once this brain cell dies, it does not regrow. So we've got to look after it. And these brain cells communicate with each other via little chemical messengers. They flip from cell to cell. And so alcohol can kill the brain cell. Mercury can kill the brain cell. We are exposed to mercury in 3 ways we can be exposed. One is fish. It's hardly a fish today it doesn't have mercury in it. And mercury is bioaccumulative. Do you know what that means? It accumulates in the tissues. The longer the mercury fillings are in your mouth, the more they're accumulating in the tissues. The bigger the fish, the more concentration of mercury. And also the flu vaccine has mercury in it. So please keep away from mercury. It's a neurotoxin. Drugs, if someone says to me, my son, he's got schizophrenia, what can I do? How old is he? 26. Has he done recreational drugs? In 99% of cases, the answer is yes. So the recreational drugs have damaged the nerve cells. They've damaged the brain cells. And once those nerve cells are damaged, unfortunately, they don't regrow. But in 1998, a group of scientists discovered brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What's brain-derived neurotrophic factor? Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is a protein. And this protein stimulates neurogenesis. What's neurogenesis? Neurogenesis is new brain cells. Now that's exciting. So what triggers brain-derived neurotrophic factor? 3 things. 3 shockers. 3 shockers can shock the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. One shocker is fasting. It's a shock when we stop eating. The body's used to getting food. And when we fast, it causes a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The second shock is finishing every hot shower with a cold rinse or do the cold plunge. That cold plunge is a shock and it causes a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The third shocker is the high-intensity interval training. When you're running for your life, when you're doing that high intensity, it causes a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Isn't God good? To show that even if our brain cells have sustained, the Bible, it talks about this. It's Ezekiel 36:36. So Ezekiel 36:36, easy to remember. And it says that the heathen that are left round about might know that I, the Lord God, build the ruined places and plant again that which was desolate. For I, the Lord God, hath spoken it, and I will do it. Isn't that wonderful news? That even if we have sustained, yes, even if we have sustained brain damage through accident, through drug abuse, through, a lot of footballers have it because of the damage to... You see, we've got this incredible skull that's there to protect us, but if we keep getting thumped, if we keep falling, look at Muhammad Ali. The last 15 years of his life, his brain wasn't working very well. It just got banged too much. Around the brain, there's fascia, and that's thin balloon type material. In fact, there's 7 layers of fascia, and in between each layer of fascia, there's fluid. God went to great lengths to protect this brain so that when we do fall, there's a nice cushion effect. But unfortunately, if this brain gets whacked too much, there certainly will be damage. So the brain-derived neurotrophic factor can be stimulated, and it can be stimulated by exercise. Dr. Neil Nedley, he discovered that if he has a very depressed bipolar patient, he puts them on 7 hours of exercise a day. Now you might say, well, that's a bit extreme, but isn't that cheap medicine? He said after 7 days, they are so improved they can go to a 1-hour day maintenance dose or 15 minutes high-intensity interval training. Because when you exercise, you increase blood supply to the body. And remember what the blood's carrying? The blood's carrying the nutrients, it's carrying the oxygen. And we've got 1 trillion cells in our brain. And if every one of our 1 trillion cells has enough oxygen going down to get to the pathway that'll give us 36 units of energy, wow, how's your brain going to start working? Very well. You'll start thinking clearer. What Dr. Neil Nedley also discovered, that breathing through the nose meant more oxygen going into those brain cells. One of the things he mostly worked on was nutrition. And he found that the 3 essential food groups made a huge difference. Fiber. Fiber is high in minerals. And the messages that come down this arm basically come down like this. And that's calcium constricts, magnesium relaxes. Calcium constricts, magnesium relaxes. Where do we get our calcium and our magnesium? Dark green leafy vegetables. Another reason why vegetables are so important. Also, fats. And raw nuts and seeds are the high source of our B vitamins. B vitamins are brain vitamins. And these little energy cycles inside the cell and also the synapses from cell to cell require B vitamins. But the little chemical messengers that flash from cell to cell, they're made from amino acids, and amino acids comes from the protein that we eat. But the fat that he particularly targeted to help people was the omega-3. So the foods highest in omega-3 are walnuts. I think God's got a sense of humor because the nut highest in omega-3 looks like a brain. Also chia seeds, and you can get some beautiful recipes for chia puddings, chia desserts. It goes like a nice soft gel, so it makes a lovely dessert. Also ground flaxseed, just putting ground flaxseed on your breakfast every day. Keep it frozen, it deteriorates very quickly. The reason why omega-3 is so important is because omega-3 gives a beautiful suppleness to the membrane around the cell. Omega-3 also creates electromagnetic field in its molecular structure, increasing the flash of messages from cell to cell. And in his book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, Udo Erasmus, he shows research that reveals that depressed, even suicidal people, they discovered their brains were almost totally deficient in omega-3s. You've heard of the SAD disease, the seasonal affective disorder that's affecting the northern countries. Do you know it never used to be there? Because people used to eat their traditional food. And traditional food was always high in omega-3 in those cold countries. So we've got to go back to our traditional diets, eating the food that's grown around us. Now, if I went and lived up in Alaska, no, I wouldn't eat fish, and I wouldn't eat seal, and I wouldn't eat whale. I'd just take some lots of chia seeds and flax seeds to get my omega-3. You see, the problem today is hardly a fish that is not contaminated. There's hardly a whale, hardly a seal that's not contaminated. Because unfortunately, we human beings haven't looked after our planet properly. And there's a lot of chemicals, even up in Alaska, they're finding chemicals. So this is what Neil Nedley did. He got them to start eating nourishing food. And he also looked at timing. Timing, eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, supper like a pauper, eating the lightest meal at the end of the day, which helps the person to sleep better. When we go to sleep at night, our stomach wants to sleep too. But when it's full of food, it's very difficult for the stomach to have its rest and its sleep. So Dr. Neil Nedley started to implement an exercise program. He started to show them how to get routine in their lives, a better diet, breathing through the nose, stopping the stimulants, starting to read the Bible, especially the Psalms and the stories of Jesus, learning to trust in God, going to bed early, drinking more water, getting sunshine every day. But back to the abstain, reducing technology time, especially after dark. Reducing technology time then, because that's a big interferer with proper sleep. He said if he could even equal the effect of medication on his patients, he would be happy. And I'll never forget what he said next. He said, far exceeded. So implementing these Sustain Me principles far exceeded the effect of medication on depression. Now that surprised me, but I have to tell you, I was on the edge of my seat. I'd never heard such a thing. And then I started investigating. And I started reading other authors, and I discovered that there were clinics in the US where psychiatrists and psychologists were using lifestyle and diet to control mental illness. So it certainly has been used. And his book, Depression: A Way Out, what I love about that book, rather than showing you how all of these work with brain function, every chapter starts with someone else's story. So there's many chapters, many different stories, because everyone has a different story. And so when we had a young girl, when I say young girl, she was 29, attend our program, she said to me, I've got depression. Do you know you can't just get depression? That defies reason. Newton's third law of motion states to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. Depression isn't a cause, it's an effect. So what's the question? Next question, well, why? So I started to investigate. I said, when did you first have these feelings of sadness? She said, I started to get very emotional when I was 13. Aha, what's happening at 13? At 13, puberty. So that told me straight away. And upon investigation more, I discovered her mother had been on the pill for 5 years before she gave birth to her. And so I started to see the link there. This girl had a hormonal imbalance. So diagnosed with depression at 15, and now she's almost 30. 15 years she's been struggling with this. And all that was offered her was antidepressants. I said, did anything else happen around that time? And she looked down. I could see that she wanted to tell me but didn't want to tell me. I said, is there something else? She nodded. She said, my uncle touched me. I said, oh dear. I said, that is wrong. Now notice what I did not do. I did not ask her to enhance on the story. You see, I'm not interested in digging up graves. They're full of rotten things. I did not ask her to enhance on her story. You see, when we enhance on those negative stories, guess what happens? They get bigger and they get bigger and they get bigger. These are physical pathways in our brain. We should not allow ourselves to become prisoners of the past. And what helps us to be prisoners of the past is to reliving the pain. I used to work as a psychiatric nurse. I used to sit in the group therapies, and every patient had to relive their pain. Whew. I don't want to hear it. They're horrible stories, but they have to keep reliving it. It defies reason for me. And I didn't see people get better. It's as if they're prisoners of their past, locked into that pain. So when she told me, I said, this is wrong. I was very strong on that. I said, this is wrong. I said, this is one of the worst cases of betrayal, that an adult betrays the trust that a young girl has in them. Now, the reason I was strong on that, because I have found in so many cases that when a young person has been sexually abused, they feel it's their fault. They feel guilty. They feel dirty. And they're too embarrassed to tell anyone. And I discovered that this young girl had been carrying this for 15 years and hadn't told a soul. She hadn't told anyone, but she was reliving her pain, feeling that it was her fault, that she must have done something, that she was in this spiral. I said, this is wrong. I said, this should never have happened. And I said, it is not your fault. You're an innocent young girl. And then I went one step further, and she did not like my next suggestion. I said, have you forgiven your uncle? Her body language told me that I said something terrible. And I said, let me tell you something about forgiveness. We will never feel like it because the pain goes too deep and too great. So you don't go to feelings. You know what feelings are? They're like a wild horse, and they can go up and down like the wind. Our best guide is our prefrontal cortex. I said to her, forgiveness is a prefrontal cortex decision. I said, when you forgive, you cut the chains that bind you to that painful past. Forgiveness gives you wings. It gives you healing. And I read this in an old book. Forgiveness is the only prescription that has the power to break the chemical bonds of hostility, anger, and hate. Just do it. Just do it. It will free you. She was hesitating. She said, all right. There's no feeling there. How could there be? How could there be? So many people are held back because of their emotions. Just do it. And when you do it, a law of the mind kicks in. While it is a law of the mind that our words reveal our feelings, it is also a law of the mind that our words affect our feelings. Just do it. And when she said, all right, I forgive, I jumped up, shook her hand and said, congratulations. I think you've just made one of the most important decisions of your life. She gave a polite nod. I saw her that afternoon and she came to me smiling. She said, I'm feeling better about it. I said, you are experiencing a law of the mind that your words affect your feelings. Now, she had a pathway there of bitterness and anger. In the book Ministry of Healing, there's a chapter called Mind Cure. And in that chapter, the author says, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust, all break down the life forces and can invite decay and death into the body. Those negative feelings. And what Dr. Carolyn Leaf shows in her book, Who Switched Off My Brain, so this is a modern Christian psychoanalyst, she says, when we entertain or cherish negativities, thorns grow between the dendrites. Thorns. These are physical thorns. Physical thorns that can damage the tissues. So the writer of Ministry of Healing, who wrote that, late 1800s, she says, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust, all can break down the life forces. And now research today shows that's absolutely true, because that's what these thorns can do. But what Dr. Carolyn Leaf shows, that when we forgive, when we make the decision to forgive, two things have to be present for this to happen in the brain. Two things. One, the decision to forgive. Two, we have to go to bed before midnight, because before midnight, the glial cells are the most active, and the glial cells are the brain's vacuum cleaners. So when we make the decision to forgive and are asleep before midnight, ideally at 10 o'clock, the glial cells come along and vacuum clean up the thorns. Research now confirms that forgiveness has a physiological effect to clean up the brain. 2 days later, she said, I don't feel like it today. I said, no wonder. This is happening to you because of this trigger. But I said, you'll get over it. She nodded. I said, you'll get over it. Because it can take 21 days for the new pathway. 21 days before the new pathway is bigger than the old pathway. And after 2 days, her resentment, grief, guilt pathway was still stronger than her new pathway. 21 days of not going down that old pathway. 21 days of going down the new pathway. And this young woman rewired her brain. 60 days and it's in cement. Now, the beautiful music that we heard this evening, those ladies didn't start playing the harp yesterday, did they? They've got strong pathways in their brain where they went over and over and over to master the playing of the harp. That same process of learning a musical instrument, of learning a new language, of memorizing verses, it's the same process of rewiring the brain. And the research shows that we can be rewiring our brain right up until the day we die. It's as simple as this. If you say you can, you will. And if you say you can't, you're right, you won't. Repetition is the mother of retention, and repetition deepens the impression. After 21 days, it becomes easy because you've got that new pathway. The science shows now we have a neuroplastic brain. Our brain is soft-wired. It's only in the last 15 years they've acknowledged that, but the Bible talks about a soft-wired brain. It talks about this in Proverbs 13 verse 10. It says, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed," because we have a neuroplastic brain. And also the other proverb is found in Proverbs 22:24. "Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways, and it become a snare for thy soul." So be careful who you're with. Be careful what you're reading. Because everything that goes into our brain is having an effect. What was lovely is 2 weeks later, we saw this young girl leave our retreat. She had the wild yam cream in her bag. She'd started to apply it, and she learned how it was going to boost her happy hormone, progesterone. She'd made the decision to forgive her abuser. She'd started to drink more water. She'd stopped the coffee. She started to go to bed earlier. She started an exercise program. She learned how to make beautiful food. So she wasn't totally better yet, but she was on the road. And things had happened at the retreat that gave her hope. And hope sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. And faith and hope are inseparable companions. And the Bible has a lovely verse on faith. It's found in Hebrews 11 verse 1. It says, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for." It's the evidence of things not seen. If you can see it, it's not faith. Faith and hope are inseparable companions, and we have a choice. We can choose fear or we can choose faith. And faith you can't see, and actually fear you can't see either. Now, I remember lecturing at a retreat a few years ago, and this lady had a t-shirt on that said, "Fear is a liar." It's true, isn't it? Fear is a liar. That's why we should never make a decision on fear. And because it's an emotion, we can actually resist it. See, God gave us choice. So I started to implement what I was learning, and I saw so many people heal, which was really nice. If someone's on antidepressants, they can't just stop. But once they implement these lifestyle changes, once they make the choice to forgive their abuser, to forgive anyone who's ever upset, hurt, once they make those decisions, and if necessary, start applying the yam cream, start to bring balance back into the body and balance back into the brain, you see a breaking of all of these laws causes an imbalance in the brain. Once it's all implemented, then the person will feel the effects. And then they can start easing off the antidepressants very slowly. We had a program where we had a young woman, 33, and halfway through the program, she didn't tell anyone, but she stopped her antidepressants. And the last day, when it was time for everyone to go home on Sunday morning, one of the staff said, "Barbara, can you quick, come and see Victoria?" I said, "What's the matter?" She's just curled up in her room crying. So I went in and I said, "What's the matter?" So this was unusual because usually we see our guests walking out looking fantastic, feeling great. And here was this girl. I said, "What's happened?" She said, "It might have something to do with it. I stopped my antidepressants 3 days ago." And I went, "Oh dear." Oh dear. I said, "You will need to go back on them. You can't just stop them." So she went back on them, and we kept her there another night till we had her stabilized. And I said to her, "You can come off them, but little by little by little," because she'd been on them for 5 years, so her body was used to them. So you just can't stop. Now, if someone started antidepressants 2 weeks ago, they can usually stop because they've actually barely kicked in at that stage. But if someone's been on them for a while, they need to ease off them slowly. Mind-altering medication like anxiety medication, panic attack medication, antidepressants, mind-altering medication, and cortisone, steroids, they need to be handled with care if someone's wanting to come off them. They need to come off them little by little by little. But the first step is to give the body the right conditions, to start hydrating it, start nourishing it, start inhaling through the nose, stop the stimulants, give nutrition, exercise every day. And what that will do is that will strengthen the prefrontal cortex. But what makes the prefrontal cortex even more interesting, I think, is that that's where God communicates with man. You see, God is not in every man. You would never say God was in Hitler, Mugabe, Stalin. These are men who've caused the deaths of millions. No, no, no. God gave mankind choice. And when someone chooses wrong, innocent people suffer. And one lady said, well, why doesn't God come in and just mow them all down if he's all powerful? He is all powerful. The Bible says he spoke and it was done with the creation of the planet. He is all powerful, but he made man to be a free moral agent. And if he comes in and steps in, he now becomes a God of force, and God is not a God of force. He's a gentleman God. And in Revelation 3:20, the Bible gives a beautiful illustration where God says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And he said, and if any man hear my voice and open the door, he says, I'll come in and sup with him and he with me. Do you know, a few days ago, Sylvia said to me, we really wanted to serve a meal at night because it's so nice to eat together, isn't it? It's nice. When we meet with friends, don't we often say, let's go for a meal to eat together? You invite friends for a meal. And I thought, what a lovely illustration that God has given. He said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. It's the door of our mind. It's right here at the prefrontal cortex, using reason, intellect, and judgment. He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if any man hear my voice and open the door, who opens the door? We do. He said, and if any man opens the door, he says, I'll come in. I'll come in and sup with him and he with me. A beautiful illustration of the intimacy with which God wants to know you and me. It's such a personal thing. Such a personal thing. We see God's hand in the beauty of nature. We see God's hand when we especially read the stories of Jesus. That's where we see his hand. And as we investigate the stories of Jesus, as we investigate the beauty of nature, and what amazes me is the more deeply I study the human body, the more I'm amazed at the incredible creation of God. But I'm also amazed at this incredible body and its ability to adapt and adjust. In fact, what some people are doing to their bodies and what they're eating, I just can't believe they're still alive. An illustration of how the body adapts and adjusts. But it's also an illustration that as soon as their reason, intellect, and judgment are appealed to, as soon as they realize, I'm not doing right by my body, I'm going to start to do right by my body. As soon as they make the decision, I'm going to start easing off my coffee. I'm going to start giving my body more water. I'm going to start going to bed a little bit earlier. I'm going to start an exercise program. As soon as we do that, the body begins to respond. And then the adaptation process goes the positive way. And we can start to heal. But don't be surprised. It's like one lady said to me, Barbara, My husband and I, we've got aches and pains and rashes, and we're vegan. We eat a plant-based diet. I said, how old are you? 69. How long have you been on this diet? 1 year. What about all the rest? What about all the rest? Florence Nightingale says, she says that disease is a process of repair. Sometimes there's a bit of a cleanup happening. And as that cleanup happens and some of the old habits, they start to go into better habits, but there can be a little bit of a cleaning process as this comes out. As I mentioned this morning, once you stop the allergens and start clearing up this sinus, there can be a lot of green slime starting to come out, even though you've stopped the foods that can cause irritation, even though you've started to give the body the right conditions, there's a bit of a cleaning process. And the waste must come out. It might come out via skin. And sometimes as it's coming out via the skin, it can be a little toxic and you can develop rashes. And sometimes as it's coming out of the colon, you can get a bit of diarrhea. And some people say, when I was living the bad life, I didn't have any of this. But now I'm living a better life. These bits and pieces are happening. I said, well, there's a bit of a cleaning up process happening. And you can actually support the body as it does that cleaning up process. And by supporting the body as it does it, how do you support the body? These simple laws of health are the best way to sustain the body as it does the cleanup process. And we know what it's like when we decide to clean up the house. It can look pretty messy halfway through, can't it? Everything was quite comfortable, chocked up in the cupboards, but when we open the cupboards and start to clean them out. So there's a little bit of a process there, and that process is all part of getting our body back into better working order. So the girl that was in a heap in the room on the Sunday morning, and we got her to go back on her antidepressants and kept her another night, and she was certainly feeling better the next day. And I said, you will be able to do it, but just do it little by little. Go a little bit slower. Well, the good news is she contacted me 5 months later. She said, I'm off all my antidepressants. And it is now, when I think back, it must be 15 years later, and she's going so well. So very well. Because I do not know anyone who's been on antidepressants for a while who's going well. I don't see them going well, but they don't seem to have any alternative. So I'm very thankful to Dr. Neil Medley, who was the first doctor that opened my eyes that there's even a way to manage mental health issues without drug medication. Drugs never cure disease. They never cure disease in the body, and they never cure disease in the mind. They might mask symptoms, and in a crisis they may be necessary. And if someone is bipolar, schizophrenia, and they're on medication, they cannot stop. But I have met 5 people in my travels who've been diagnosed, confirmed schizophrenia, bipolar, they're medication-free and managing well. As a psych nurse, I never heard of such a thing. One of the problems is when they're on medication, it's often very difficult for them to make the right decisions to do what you've got to do to get this brain starting to work well. But it can. That is the good news. It's also very important to forgive and let that past go. It's not burying it under the carpet. When you forgive, it's like you turn painful past to dust. There's no bad smell there anymore. And the Bible says in Philippians 3:13, this one thing I can do, forgetting the things which are behind, I reach forth to the things which are before. I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. What's the prize? What's the high calling? Do you remember what Jesus said in John 10:10? He said, I have come that they might have life, and that they might have life more abundantly. That's God's calling. And Jesus said, and Most people have heard this one before, and I think it's a very good one. It's found in Matthew 28, verse 11, where Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and you will find rest to your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We serve a solution God. And no matter what you've been through, no matter what you're going through, God has a way. He has a path through that. And that is the good news. And what I find is so helpful to me is I pray every day. Every day I surrender my prefrontal cortex to God. I say, "Father in heaven, please come in. I need you today. I need superhuman help to do what I've got to do. I need your guidance at every single step." And he will never fail us. But at every choice, no matter what we're going through, we still have a choice. We still have a choice at every single step. But if we choose to know him, if we choose to listen to that still, quiet voice in our hearts, he will faithfully guide us through every situation. And what does he say in 1 Thessalonians 5:21? Prove all things. Prove it. I have proven it. I have proven it for the last 45 years. And I hold fast because it is so good. What I'd like to do is I'd like to close with a prayer before we go into question and answers. Father in heaven, thank you so much for what you've shown us tonight. Thank you so much that you are the great God of heaven, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of our bodies, our minds, and so you are the solution, God. We thank you for bringing each one of us here, and we thank you that you will also go with each one of us as we return to our homes. Thank you for hearing our prayer tonight, Father, for we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. So we'll look at questions now. Okay. I think we're just about getting through all the questions. We've endeavoured to. There's some of them we eliminated because sometimes there were 5 that were all exactly the same. So we've endeavoured to look at every one of them.
Test, test, test. Okay, thank you. Okay, questions. This is a good one for tonight. How does suppressed emotions affect the nervous system long term? And what can women do to begin to heal from it naturally?
Is this suppressed emotion?
Suppressed emotions. Suppressed emotions.
You know, it's not good to suppress them. It's good to look at them. It's good to think, now, why do I feel like this? Have I had enough sleep? Have I drunk enough water? That's the easiest place to start. And then sometimes you might think, well, I'm feeling frustrated because my neighbour, she just poisoned all my rose plants. I don't know. So just pulling all her rose plants. I don't know. You know, can you move? There's always a solution. So when there's an issue, we must not suppress it. We must look at it and find out, well, what can we do with this? You know, sometimes we can't change it, so we need to accept it and find the best out of it. But sometimes we need to forgive. Sometimes there is always a way through it, I'll find.
Okay. How do you feel about chewing gum?
How do I feel about chewing gum? Well, I was reading in one dentist, he reckons chewing gum is great. It helps to clean the teeth. My granddaughters who were traveling, they said, we get some healthy chewing gum because when we're traveling, it's hard to clean our teeth. And sometimes Jack and I do it, but we always get one that is a healthy one. It's got no sugar in it and no plastic in it. But I don't think one should chew gum all the time. I think there might be time and place where it might be helpful.
Is matcha bad too?
Matcha?
Matcha. M-A-T-C-H-A, matcha.
I don't know what it is.
It's a tea.
It's a tea. I guess it depends if it's got.
It's a stimulant. Caffeine.
Jacqueline says it's got caffeine in it, so.
Okay. Is biopsy, I think we have, there's another one. Is biopsy of the prostate safe?
No. Sorry, that was a bit quick. Biopsies are never safe because what a biopsy does is it takes tissue out of your body. And whenever you take tissue out of your body, you're damaging the tissue. So I never advise this. We had a guest that had had 16 fine needle biopsies of his prostate. I said to him, is there anything left?
Wow.
The prostate's about as big as a walnut. You put 16 needles in there. If you haven't got a problem before that, you got a problem now.
Is it true that digestion cannot begin until the liquid is absorbed first?
That's right, and that's one of the reasons we shouldn't drink a lot with our meals because it waters down our digestive enzymes and they can only work in an acid environment. So what the body does is it stops digestion to give time for the water to be absorbed out of the stomach and then bring the acidity back up and then resume digestion.
Why no meat or fish if it's clean?
Well, to eat meat, there has to be a death. And in the Garden of Eden, there was no death. And that's why God said, I've given you every herb-bearing seed. So I ate fruits and vegetables, nuts and grains and legumes. And also, there's not many safe meats today. But not only that, our gastrointestinal tract is 10 yards long. So if a person eats meat, that it really should be moving through ideally in 16 hours because meat putrefies. But also, it's very difficult. As soon as an animal dies, the putrefaction process sets in. So it has to be refrigerated very quickly so that it's actually not going to kill you. I just like lentils too.
How much protein should we have per day?
I never like to put a name on it, but probably an average of 65 to 70 grams of protein a day. But as long as you have some protein every meal, you're getting adequate.
Hip problems. Could hip issues be related to not walking correctly? How are both of my parents, however, both of my parents have double hip replacements and I want to avoid it.
Well, the joints need to be well lubricated and water lubricates them. When people aren't drinking enough water, their joints aren't getting lubricated. Also, our bones are made out of minerals. And what leaches the minerals out of our bones is stimulants. So many people have weak bones and weak joints because they're having too many stimulants. And our bones need nourishment, especially minerals. So all your vegetables, they're the highest minerals, and the Baja or Celtic salt, that's a good way to get minerals into you. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter called Building Better Bones. So you certainly can prevent total hip replacements. If a person's about to have a total hip replacement, I say have it. Because if we'd been able to work on it 10 years before, maybe it could have been prevented. Is it because the person's not walking properly? Why wouldn't they walk properly? Would it be because their pelvis is out or their spine's out? So that's where you can visit a chiropractor or osteopath and get them to look that the alignment of your spine is well.
Thank you. Preventing brain calcification.
The best way to prevent brain calcification is to go to bed early, because when we go to bed early, ideally we should be in bed by 10 o'clock, ideally 9, between 9 and 10, glial cells are activated. And remember I said they're the brain's vacuum cleaner, and they're vacuuming up those thorns before the between the dendrites, they also vacuum up any little calcium deposits that are trying to develop in the brain. So going to bed early will help to clean up any calcified deposits.
I think I've missed that all week. Uh-oh, I know. Not good. Constipation from meds.
From meds, from medication, stop the medication. If it's antidepressants or cortisones, you're going to have to ease off it slowly. But drinking a lot of water, medication dehydrates quite badly. So I'd have a look at what the meds are, and quite possibly in Sustain Me, you'll find ways or alternatives to medications.
I have tried wild yam for over 6 months with no change. Do you have any other recommendations to help?
Well, I'm wondering what the changes are, or what the changes are that are expected, because the yam cream does balance the hormones. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. It's difficult for the yam cream to have full effect if the person's dehydrated, if the person's having sugar, if the person's having coffee, if the person's having alcohol. So I'd look at all those points.
Fastest liver detox.
The fastest liver detox, you'll find in my book, Sustain Me, and also in Self-Heal by Design. In both books, I have a chapter on the liver, and there's a 5-day liver gallbladder detox in there.
Best snack food.
Best snack food is water. Oh, actually, a little bit of salt, and then the water.
Okay. This one just says pokeberries, ?
Yeah, pokeberries are from the plant called the pokeroot plant. And the pokeroot plant is considered a toxic plant, but it's actually the best lymphatic cleanser there is. It can be taken, but in very small amounts, but it is quite a remarkable lymphatic cleanser.
What to do for tick bites?
For a tick bite, extract it by twisting, put the tweezers around the neck and twist it as you pull, and then you can apply tea tree oil, you could apply oregano oil. If it looks a bit swelling, you could apply charcoal. Charcoal absorbs and neutralizes poisons, but if it gets to the point that it's really swelling, you just ice it. Sometimes you ice it every half hour. You just keep icing it, and eventually the swelling will go down.
What helps Lyme disease?
There's a book called Healing Limes, so you can Google Healing Limes by Stephen Harrod Brunner. And when I was in Eden Valley, Colorado, the health retreat in Colorado, about 5 years ago, a young woman came up to me and she said she had Lyme, so I told her to get the book, Healing Limes by Stephen Harrod Brunner. I went back a year later and she said, "Thank you for giving me my book. I've conquered my Lymes." So she adhered to the protocol he has in there. I think he uses water treatments and essential herbs, essential oils.
What are your thoughts on immunotherapy for cancer patients?
Immunotherapy is a total deception. It does not boost your immune system at all. It's a total deception. So immunotherapy, I would never take immunotherapy.
Are you against vitamin K injections post-birth?
Yes. None of my babies had the vitamin K injection. The only time a baby would need a vitamin K injection is if the mother bleeds extensively at birth. That's the only reason, but there's really no need for a baby to have a vitamin K injection.
Can you speak on child vaccines?
Yes, I can speak on child vaccines. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, I don't know if anyone's watched any of her podcasts. Excellent information. We did a conference with her a few months ago in North Carolina, and she spoke She spoke about the vaccines, and she said to the people in the audience, and there were a lot of New Agers, a lot of hippies, a lot of alternate people. She said, what's the point of giving your children the best food? What's the point of dressing them in the best organic clothes if you're going to poison them with the vaccines? She was very strong. And she was very strong because of what she has seen. And I tell you what she says because I totally agree with her. Vaccines do not prevent disease. They do not. They certainly haven't prevented COVID, have they? In fact, the figures show there's more deaths from the vaccine than ever were to the COVID. And it's the same thing with the childhood vaccinations. All the childhood illnesses had already 80% stopped because of the increase in hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition because of Florence Nightingale. So when these diseases were 80% wiped out, then the vaccines were introduced. And yet what are we told? We're told that it was the vaccines, but it is not true.
That concludes our questions for this evening. Thank you,
Okay,
Barbara.
Thank you.
We're going to have a few door prizes now. Dan, could you help me? The tumblers down there. Yeah, you can do it here. So some of the books that we're going to be doing, Barbara has spoken to us about